Welcome to A CoFi with the FinTech Pod. We'll explore the latest trends, innovations, and ideas shaping the financial industry. Join host Alex Irigoyen as he interviews leading experts in the field. Learn from top CFO, tech leaders, investors, and many more. Join us and get inspired. Let's get started.
Hi, welcome to the pod of CoFi. Today we are with Brian Pulsipher, VP of Finance at Continu. Thank you very much, Brian, for joining us today in the call.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome. So, Brian, you started your career early as a data analyst, then you moved to the world of VC, and right now you are leading the finance team in a tech startup. Could you share some background about how did you start, how did you move into the VC world, and how did you end up today working as VP of Finance at Continu?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Alex. Excited to be with you today and be on the podcast. Yeah, I mean, the quick synopsis on that. I'm an accountant by trade, so actually more on the audit gap side of things is kind of my training. Quickly pivoted into the PE world, specifically, private equity, real estate. I did some work in the private lending side, some in healthcare, strangely enough, and then most of my efforts there was as a CFO of Stillwater Equity Partners. It was a real estate development firm, and grew that business and did a lot of fun things around the country, building hotels and golf courses and those kind of things. So it was fun. Pivoted out of that into fractional CFO work or part-time CFO work for various seed series to B series companies in the Bay Area primarily. Did everything from cosmetics to biotech to entertainment to obviously Saas. And then, that landed me at my current position right now at Continu. I'm the Vice President of Finance here at Continu. We're a learning management platform. We're a modern learning platform. I think most people know that space is like LMS or LXP, but effectively we're just kind of disrupting that space. We do have a lot of features and we do have a lot of integrations, but we're a horizontal SaaS play where we're able to help our customers and help our customers' employees and help their vendors and anybody else that they want to learn and to upskill. And we have a very unique way of engaging their audiences to learn with 21st century learning. So that's kind of the roadmap.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for sharing, Brian. So definitely Continu is a company that is backed by venture capital. You've been working in the investor side, as you mentioned, in private equity. So you kind of saw the two sides of the coin. I don't know if you could explain how does it help your background as an investor now that you are probably leading pretty much, I don't know if every day, but probably every month with investors.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more than every month for sure. We'd like to keep a close relationship, but yeah, it's a good question. I do come more from that, that real estate private equity side. So a little bit different than the VC side, or even growth equity is a big entrant, I think, in the space. They really like to differentiate themselves from VC. And if you look at their thesis for their funds, they're quite different. But I think just generally, I feel pretty empathetic towards what they're trying to do. And what I mean by that is, in the high sense of, if you break your arm and somebody else breaks their arm, you guys have a connection, right?
Yeah.
Having been in that fund space, I kind of understand what they're trying to accomplish. Most of these VCs, it's not, if somebody's leading you around on a seed series, A series, B series, it's generally not their capital. It's usually from a fund that has private investors, but more so probably institutional investors who've put substantial capital into that fund. And that fund has a thesis with time and with a rate of return, an estimated rate of return. And so I think I have a good understanding as I deal with our investors that they do believe in our company, but their external pressures have to do with value, time, and risk, right? And so as I help them and understand our value, and the timing of our company and the respective risk,
Mm-hmm.
I not only mitigate their concerns, but I also empower them to help us, right? Which they're incentivized to either add value, to help us on the timeline, or mitigate our risk. So it's more symbiotic, and I feel like I have a good empathetic position for what they're trying to accomplish.
Right. Definitely, I think empathy is a very good point to describe it, since definitely the interests kind of are the same, but also there are going to be some differences that with the empathy it's probably sure very very great to handle. So Brian, in the last few years, we saw that there's been very big macro changes. So 3 years ago, we started with the pandemic. Then it seemed a very very good time for tech firms. Now it seems like it's going to be a recession, or we're already going through a recession. So I wonder how the relationship, or more like the reporting with these investors, has evolved during these last 3 years, that I will separate like three different stages, right? So when we start with COVID, that everybody was super worried, then it seemed that it was a great era for the tech firms, and now again this recession. Do the investors change what they ask, or how is this reporting evolving through the last 3 years?
Yeah, I mean it's a big question. As I think about that respective to my own experiences in the Bay and also here at Continu, I don't think I'm going to say anything revolutionary, but I think it all stems around profitability, right? Efficient, prudent growth. I think we're seeing that shift when go back a year ago, it could have been growth at all costs, and you could get away with pretty minimal reporting, I would say, and almost just annualized or even semi-annual reporting for your board and for your investors, and they would just hands off, let you go. Not that that's necessarily what we should do as heads of finance or vice presidents or CFOs, but I think you'll see a big shift right now, and we already see it, which is that push towards, again, efficient, effective growth. Part of that means just more iterative reporting, more timely reporting that's focused on cash and efficiency metrics. So, yeah, I think that's the big push right now. It's cash centric, efficient reporting to help people understand the risk profiles associated with your company and associated with your growth trajectory.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like we've been moving from revenue at all costs to more efficiency, and also the number of reporting that you have to do, or the cadency that you are doing is higher, right? So you are reporting every, well, I mentioned month, but it seems like it might be even weeks or shorter. So in that change from revenue to profitability, what would you say are the three main KPIs that investors are checking right now about profitability? Is there any specific KPI that they are very looking to when they working with you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm in the Saas space, so I'm going to ignore ARR when it comes to like high level metrics, just because that if there was a golden metric for SaaS, I mean that's what it is, right? Everything, the underpinnings center around ARR, but I think net revenue retention has a high focus right now as you look at assessing companies, and so making sure that's nice and fair and strong. I had a conversation with an investor the other day, former relationship when I was a CFO of a different company, and they had mentioned like, even if your rule of 40 right now is somewhat on the low side, if you have a really strong net revenue retention, that can actually even surpass some of those discounts that they would have effectively put on your company, just because it's we're seeing a push towards profitability. We're also seeing an increase in terms of CAC, right? CAC is growing right now, which is scary. And so that land and expand model with your existing customer base is far more efficient way to grow. And it's a big focus for investors. I'd say the other, so it depends on your company size and stage, but I think in the seed series to Series B, probably looking at basically effective runway. So all things the same, what is your cash over your current burn? What does that actually look like? How long could you stretch the business? Or it could be profit recapture. If you have a very tried and true model where you have a lot of confidence, it could be a profit recapture period, which is even better. But also, I would go back to that. What is your effective runway? To that point, I think it was Peter Walker. I think he leads insights over at Carta. Published some data the other day where he mentioned that seed round to A, the gap, that the timing between seed and A round, in the last few months is now the average timeline is now exceeded 2 years, which for that stage is kind of scary, to be honest. I think historically back in 21, it was around 1 year. And even A to B round has increased a year in just the last 9 months in terms of the timeline between those rounds. A little less so in the B to C rounds, but I think that just points to the fact that effective runway is a really important metric, or whatever your profit recapture period looks like as well. So, and then the third one I just mentioned would just be like, it'd be some type of efficiency metric in terms of burn multiple, rule of 40, magic number, just something where you're not just encapsulating top line revenue or ARR growth, but you're looking at a holistic approach of, as I would say, being living here in Utah, not getting over your skis, right? Making sure that you're actually running a cash flowing operating business, and you're not over investing in your growth part of your business. So, yeah, that's kind of
super useful. Thank you very much for sharing. The other point that you mentioned is that the frequency that you are reporting has increased. Now the reporting, I assume that it's more in detail. The investors want to do more drill down in every detail. So how do you manage all that extra work, right? Because already a finance leader has so much task to go through. So that extra reporting, extra analysis that you are doing, how do you manage? Is it with more people, technology? How does Brian work through that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think just on the core baseline here, right? I mean, the reporting reporting requirements have increased, right? Even outside of the economic changes we've seen just in the last few years, I would say reporting requirements have increased just because of the data sets and the automation that's possible. But yeah, the way that I can deal with that today comes back to I think just automating things that don't change very often first. Make anything you have controls around. We have a lot of controls around accounting. We have a lot of controls around billing. We have a lot of controls around AP, right? Those things you can automate your data sets there and automate that reporting. It's generally not going to change, right? Those type of flows. And then I think it's to get a really good team, whether that be a fractional team, an outsourced accounting firm, or it could be an internal team, depending on your size, where you can work with some effective tools to have iterative reporting, right? So where you have a good basis. For the likes of CoFi, right? I mean, part of the reason I'm even on this, right, is, CoFi is one of those things where it's exciting that you could have iterative reporting where you can kind of have that capability within your hands to change on the go, if you will, with your type of reporting and answer to the board's needs. So I think that just comes back to, again, automating your base data sets and anything that has controls around it, just so you don't have to worry about it, and focus the remaining effort on getting your team to do iterative reporting with some of these newer tools that exist to drill into deeper SaaS metrics and to make scenario comparisons or historical comparisons or those kind of things.
Awesome. So if you will, as a summarize, we've been talking about empathy with the investors, the KPIs now, the tools and the leverage for doing all that reporting. If you will suggest 2-3 tips in general for finance leader handling this reporting in this situation, in this macroeconomic situation, is there any tips that you will have for them in a high level?
Yeah, it's a big question, but a good one nonetheless. Yeah, I think, just not to sound like a broken record, I'll add a third one that's maybe a little bit more novel, but again, I would come back to make sure you have automation, right? Try to automate your reporting as much as possible. And I think also to make it cash and efficiency centric, right? Help them understand. Coming back to what I originally said from that empathy position, your VCs and your investors, whether it's personal capital or institutional capital, they're looking for an IRR. They're looking for an internal rate of return, which is based on value, time, and risk. Help them understand the value and the timeline of your company. Help them understand where you're sitting in the risk profile. You can do that by drilling down into the efficiency metrics of your company, and it's easier than it sounds if you have the right automated tech stack. I think beyond that, the one novel thing I would say would just be outside of automation and efficiency centric or cash centric reporting, would be written. I thought it was interesting. One of my CFO, mentors, if you will, years and years ago, he was transitioning away from written, paragraph style reporting and more just to these dashboards and these, different, visualizations that people do to help people understand the metrics of the business. Yeah. But I think I've been feeling a lot of pressures in just the last year, even of we have a lot of these visualizations, we have a lot of this automated reporting, and now we need to contextualize that, right? There's so much data, there's all these automated data sets that we can get at the grasp of our hands, but we still need that leader in finance, whether it's the CFO, VP, or head of finance, to help connect the dots and tell a story. Help the investors understand what the story of your business is. So, again, if I was to think about 3 critical items as I look at the next year, make sure you have that automation, make sure you're cash/efficiency centric in your reporting, and I'd add some written content there. Help them understand the story, help them understand what you're changing, connect the dots ahead of that to drive strategic questions as opposed to questions about what does that mean and how does that connect to X,
That's awesome. Super helpful, Brian. Finally, our last guest, Chris Ortega, left a question for you. I'm going to ask you later to send me over a question for our next guest. So what Chris asked was, Brian, what is the number one superpower for CFOs for the future and why?
It's a good question. I'm not. It's hard to predict the future. I think as I think about that question, again, I go back to that same mentor I had. It was one of my early CFOs, and I think he was very deliberate about his approach. But as I think about that one superpower and what he taught me is it's people. I think the ability to empower your team, whether that's internal or external. Every finance leader has a team, and then to lever them, right? So empower and lever your team. The reason I say that as opposed to generally just automation or just new tools is there's always something new. We will become obsolete effectively, just due to the time period of when we were trained and what we learned. I think he told me that mentor early in my career, he had waited the day for 20 years when he would be less efficient and less effective than one of the younger people on his staff. And he said, I was the first person that he realized it was faster and cheaper and better for me to do his work than it was for him to do his work. And I think I think we all find that as we go further into our careers, especially as leaders in finance, that there's always going to be an up-and-comer who's more in touch with the tools of today, that's more adept to coding or to spreadsheets or whatever it may be. And so we just need to make sure we can communicate effectively with them, empower them, and lever the data that they can originate and pivot. So I think it all points back to what we had discussed about, automation and efficiency metrics and all those type of things. But I think as a superpower, I don't think it's changed. I think it was the same over the last 20 years, and I think it'll continue where it's all about people. That's what it comes down to as a leader in finance.
Great. Brian, thank you very much for joining in the pod today. Just one last question. If people want to connect with you, where can we find you? LinkedIn? Are you using Twitter? Any other social media?
Yeah, I'm probably a little too busy these days for Twitter, but you're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Look up, Brian Pulsipher, Vice President of Finance at Continu. Feel free to send me a direct message, add me on LinkedIn. If you make a request, go to continu.com. You can make a request and demo, and maybe I'll join and we can chat or whatever it may be. But yeah, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Brian, thank you very much for joining us today in the pod. It's been a pleasure and looking forward to talking with you again soon.
Yep. Thanks, Alex. Always a pleasure.
Bye-bye.